Ranell. Actually, now just let's quickly go on to that question about training loads, because you showed some interest in that before, Ranell, where it was asked, what is appropriate training load? How often, how much, how long, all that. Can you give us any advice on that for young athletes?
The kids are really resilient. What we need to look at is an accumulated, what it actually creates an accumulated fatigue. And believe it or not, that the 5 to 12-year-old kids can usually deal with more than the 12 to 16-year-old kids, because what happens is that when you go through puberty, your body takes up so much energy to grow and develop. So we always talk about any young athlete having a fuel tank. And that fuel tank doesn't change, but what comes out is that you actually have school, which diminishes it. You then have, you might have family issues or challenges at home, which will emotionally, drop the fuel tank down. You might have played football, or like us, bull rushed, you know what I mean, during lunchtime, and then it goes down again. So you have to work out when the athlete presents themselves to training where their fuel tank is for that day, and whether or not the athlete's getting the correct nutrition and sleep, because sleep is the huge thing for us right now, working with young athletes, as to whether or not a fuel tank the next day has gone back to being full or whether it's still half loaded. The big thing that I would be looking at, first of all, rather than talking about volume of load, because for me, I have found over the last probably 6 to 7 years that I can't generalize over what age group actually can deal with 10 hours or 6 hours or 2 days of training or 4 days of training. I'm looking at each athlete individually, and that's because if they're on their phone all night, there's not strict rules in the household about getting 8 to 10 hours of sleep. And believe it or not, young athletes need, that are in that teenage bracket, they need more than 8 hours sleep. We've got research that shows that if you have less than 8.5 hours sleep, you're 7 times more likely to get injured. And that's between the 13 to 18 age bracket. So we're looking for these athletes to have 9 and 10 hours of sleep, and for them to understand that when they're sleeping, that's when the body is restoring. That's when they're getting their physiological adaptations to their training. And so we need this sleep to become almost like another component of their training, so that they understand that. So that's the first thing that I'll look at, because if they're not getting the correct sleep, I can't give them the volume of training that I normally would. Then the next thing that I'm looking at is nutrition. So if they've got really good nutritional intake, nutrition is healing for the body, nutrition is energy for the body, nutrition is growth and structure and all those sorts of things. So again, if the athlete's in a family environment where they're not getting good nutrition, then the volume of training has to be pulled back again, because they're at higher risk of injury. If they're in an environment where they live in a perfect family, the parents that I love, where they've got great nutritional intake, they're sleeping between their 8 and up to 10 hours a night, then you've got an athlete that you can load correctly. So then all you have to do as an athlete is ask them when they first rock up to training, where are you at today? And I do that with all of my athletes. We talk about, I say to them 1 to 10, 1, I'm dead, I want to go to bed, or 10, I'm full of energy and I'm ready to go. And if that's the case, if they're sitting like 6 to 7, you have to modify your session plan for that day. So it's not just having that mindset that this is the plan, this is what we're doing. Now, I have the luxury, of course, of working with older teams, or with my younger athletes, I work one-on-one for that specialty training. So I have the luxury of modifying. If you're working with a group of 20 kids, you can't do that just because one kid's tired. But you might look at them and have a look at their technique as they're coming down the track and say, okay, you're going to sit this next rep out. And it's not because I'm punishing you, it's because I'm rewarding you. I don't know what you say to those young kids, but do you know what I mean? You have to try and protect them, because it's your job to protect them in that training environment. But if you want to go textbook averages, so not taking in any of that kind of stuff, when you're working with the 5 to 8-year-olds, they should be doing maybe 2 nights a week, 1 hour training, and then maybe doing a little bit of training, and then add on the 5-minute microdoses. So you can do like 2 5-minute microdoses, which is 10 minutes a day, which is, another 70 minutes of training that week, but it's just really broken down. When you've got your 8 to 12-year-olds, they can do 2 to 3 sessions a week and then compete on the weekend. Again, add in those microdoses, which are very specific and customized to that specific athlete. By the time they get to like 13, 14, my athletes, are training 3, once they get to 16, 4 sessions a week, and then competing on the weekend. You know, my open athletes are doing AM, PM sessions, so they'll be in the gym in the morning, they're on the track in the evening, they're doing that 3 to 4 days a week, and then they've got additional training, you know, on the Saturday. So, but again, I wouldn't do that load if they didn't have correct sleep and nutrition and things like that.
Yeah, that's some fantastic advice. Thanks for that, Ranell.
Yeah.